They handed him an old rifle and smiled politely, assuming he'd miss, and yeah, he did, the first time. The young instructor leaned in and said under his breath, "Let's not waste too much ammo, like this was just a courtesy, not a moment." But then Eddie Dawson raised that same old rifle again, and the whole damn range went quiet. One shot, dead center, like time bowed its head for him. That morning started off cool and still, the kind of day that smelled like cut grass and gun oil. Fort Ashton always had that early morning calm before drills kicked off. It wasn't a big base, just enough brick buildings and dusty gravel lots to remind you the world's still running on discipline. A few young recruits were already lining up at the range, helmets slightly crooked, boots too clean, nerves showing even if they try to hide it behind smirks and swagger. The range was buzzing because it was test day, the quarterly marksmanship eval, where every grunt with a rifle gets to prove he can actually hit something besides the broadside of a barn. You know how it goes, everyone trying to outshoot the next guy, but half of them don't even know what recoil feels like until it slaps them. That's when the truck pulled in, beat up Ford, rust dust cloud trailing behind like some relic from a different war entirely. The door creaked open, and out stepped Eddie. Not in uniform, not in a rush, just an old man in a flannel shirt and a windbreaker that had seen better days. He had a limp, and he carried this weathered canvas bag like it held something sacred, not heavy, just personal. His grandson, Jesse Dawson, came jogging over, his face lit up like he'd seen Santa walk out that truck. "Grandpa, you made it," he said, voice low, hopeful. Eddie just nodded, gave that kind of smile that says, "Of course I did," without actually saying it. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. "Figured I'd watch you boys try to impress the brass." The other recruits looked over, didn't see much. One of them snorted. "Who's the old guy?" Jesse was about to explain, but the kid had already turned away. Typical. That's when Sergeant Kramer came over with a cheap plastic chair, one of those folding things they toss out at cookouts. "You're welcome to watch, sir," he said, polite but distant. "Just stay behind, a line night gets loud." Eddie nodded again, like he'd heard that 100 times before. But instead of sitting, he opened that canvas bag. Inside, wrapped in an old cloth, was a riflewood stock, long barrel, the kind they don't make anymore. It looked like something out of a museum, but the way he handled it, gentle, like he was shaking hands with an old friend, it was clear this wasn't about nostalgia. This was muscle memory. Kramer gave a chuckle when he saw it. "Didn't think folks still used woodstock rifles," he said. "Might want to hang that in a museum." Eddie didn't flinch. "She still works, long as my hands do." Jesse shuffled his boots, kind of embarrassed. "He used to shoot," he mumbled, but Kramer was already looking downrange. "Lane 9's open," Kramer said, like he was offering an old man a pity swing at a county fair. He could take a few shots, just for fun. That word Phoenix landed wrong. It wasn't fun. It was something else entirely. Eddie moved slower than the others, no surprise there, and when he finally stood at lane 9, he adjusted his glasses, took one breath, and raised the rifle. The first shot? Missed. Clean. A couple recruits chuckled under their breath. One leaned into another. Might want to call him medic. Even Kramer grinned. "All right, let's not waste more ammo." But Eddie didn't flinch. He just said real quiet, "One more." Kramer started to wave him off again, but something about Eddie's tone stopped him cold. "One more," Eddie repeated, and it wasn't a request, it was a statement. So they let him shoot again. And this time Amanthus time was different. Eddie stood still as a stone. "No tremble. No ruse." He brushed his thumb along the stock like he was remembering something, maybe a place, maybe a person. Then he lined up the shot. Bang! And silence. No jokes this time. Just a shot echoing down that dusty range, clean and final like a period at the end of a long sentence. People started looking around. Someone asked, "Was that a hit?" Kramer didn't answer. He just leaned over the spotting scope, zoomed all the way in, then slowly stepped back like he'd seen a ghost. The other instructors took turns looking. Nobody said a word. Then a young recruit with binoculars stepped forward. "No way," he whispered. The target was flapping gently in the breeze. Dead center bullseye, torn clean in half like someone had sliced it with a razor. "Perfect." Jesse stood there with his jaw slack, trying to understand what just happened. He built that stance in '68. he said, more to himself than anyone else. Someone in the back muttered, "Wait, what did he say his name was?" Kramer spoke up, finally. "Edward Dawson." And that namite was like dropping a stone in still water. The ripples moved fast. A few shrugged, didn't mean much. But one man, Master Sergeant Clayton, froze mid-step. "Dawson. Fort Bragg. 83, right?" He didn't wait for an answer. He just turned and walked straight to the control office, like something was ticking in his brain that he couldn't ignore. He fired up the ancient base computer thing, looked like it hadn't been touched in years, and started typing. "Dawson, Edward." One match popped up. He clicked, and there it was. A scanned photo, paper target split dead center, and a date, July 12th, 1983. Fort Bragg marksmanship record. Longest-standing bullseye under open-range conditions. Still unbroken. Clayton blinked, then printed it out like it was evidence in a case nobody remembered. When he stepped outside, a black SUV was pulling in government plates, flag decal. Colonel Daniel Whitmore stepped out, hat in hand. He walked down the range like he was approaching a legend, not a man. When he reached Eddie, he didn't salute. He just said, "Your name's been on a plaque in the range office for 40 years. Most of us never knew the man behind it was still alive." Eddie nodded. Didn't come here for applause. And Whitmore, to his credit, said, "We know. But that shot today, that wasn't just skill. That was legacy." The base felt different after that. Quieter, but heavier. Like everyone suddenly realized they'd been training under the shadow of someone who'd already done it all without ever asking for recognition. Later that day, Jesse sat with his grandfather in the control office, the old rifle laid across his lap. "You never told me," Jesse said. Eddie shrugged. Wasn't much to tell. But Jesse wasn't buying it. "You've had a record for 40 years. They said you trained half the guys in sniper school. You were one of the best." Eddie looked out the window. Records fade. Medals get boxed up. What matters is who you show up for when no one's looking. Jesse reached into the canvas bag again and pulled out a leather folder inside. Old clippings, a faded certificate, a photo. 2 soldiers and a young Eddie Dawson kneeling beside them. One man in a wheelchair, half salute, big smile. Headline read, "Army sharpshooter pulls 3 from ambush, refuses medal." "I found this online," Jesse said. "Didn't know it was you." Eddie traced the photo with his thumb. "Those boys didn't come home. Parker made it just long enough to tell the story. That's the only reason it's written down at all." "Why'd you stop?" Jesse asked. Eddie took a long time before answering. "Because after that day, it stopped feeling like a skill. Started feeling like a burden. So I trained others. Stayed behind the line. Let the young ones rise." The next day, Eddie showed up again. Not to shoot, just to sit. Thermos in hand, cap on his knee. Jesse was there with 4 recruits, same kids who'd been laughing 2 days ago. Now, they stood straighter, talked less, tried harder. Not because someone was yelling at them, but because someone was watching. Kramer came over later. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Didn't know I was looking at the reason half our training manuals exist." Eddie just shook his hand. "We all start somewhere. What matters is how we finish." Before they left, Kramer showed Eddie the target. "We framed it. It's going up next to the plaque." Eddie smiled. "Still had that plaque, huh?" "We do now." As they packed up, Jesse said, "They're going to talk about you now. You'll be remembered." Eddie took a sip of his coffee, eyes scanning the quiet field. "Not worried about being remembered," he said. "I'm just glad someone else knows the story now." 3 days later, that frame went up on the wall beside a dusty plaque from 1983. Brass plate below it read, "Edward Dawson. Fort Bragg, 1983. Returned in 2023. Still precise. Still humble." Most people walked right past. But the ones who knew, they stopped. A retired Marine leaned in once and whispered, "He missed once." Then reminded us what discipline really looks like. Out by the old flagpole, Eddie sat with his coffee, Jesse beside him. "You come a fire again?" Jesse asked. Eddie shook his head. "Nah, just came to hear it." "Hear what?" Eddie pointed his chin toward the field, where a new group of recruits was lining up. The sound of itrifles being readied, boots crunching gravel, nervous breath it carried on. They didn't say much after that. Because sometimes the loudest legacy is the quiet one-on-one that never asked for applause, just hope someone was watching when it counted. If someone in your life ever showed quiet strength, share this story with them. And if you believe dignity never retires, drop your thoughts below. What does legacy really mean to you? Where does skill end and purpose begin? Let's talk.